caching in Adobe Commerce is one of those areas that just kind of works and we don't have to touch it. And if you're like me, you're pretty happy to keep your hands out of that bucket. Unfortunately, though, it doesn't always work, as evidenced by some very slow Magento websites that I am sure you have seen yourself. I certainly have seen my share of them. And as excellent e-commerce developers, it is literally our passion. We can almost not help it, but want to get in there and just give me an opportunity to get this fixed up. Well, when that opportunity does arrive, we have to know what to do. And so that's where it is important to at least have a fundamental knowledge of caching to make sure a website is being cached properly. And in fact, that is going to be what we are going to talk about today in our Knowledge Bite conversation. As always, we ask a question, we provide 3 possible answers, and then we look at which one of those answers is the best answer given this circumstance here. If you are interested in learning more about caching at even a fairly deep level, feel free to go over to SwiftOtter.com. We have our expert developer course, which dives into these details at incredibly deep, at a deep level, and you're going to become a much better developer through that process. Let's jump into our question now. While working on a Magento 2 website, you notice strange caching behavior on a block from a custom module. We put custom module in there just to make it very clear. You didn't write this because you're such a good developer. This is not the code that you would write. Upon investigation, you find that cache invalidation seems to be problematic. You review the code for the block and see the following. So here is the overview of our block. Now, one thing before we continue, I want to call out that this is a block we are talking about here. So another potential misstep that we are seeing here is this view model does not seem to be in play. Now, block has a different function than a view model, but in most cases, a view model is all that we need. However, a block does control caching, and so that's why we're going to be focusing on a block in this conversation. Block versus view model is very important. We pretty much always want to be using a view model, and perhaps in cases where custom caching is necessary, that's where we bring a block to the table. Question: based on the code and the observed caching behavior, what is most likely reason for the caching issues? All right, A, the toHTML method is not properly implemented, causing rendering errors and caching issues. The cacheable true attribute is not set on the block layout XML. Or C, IdentityInterface is not implemented in the block class. Which answer would you select? Now, one thing I will call out is B, cacheable true attribute. We don't necessarily have a visibility into that, and that could potentially make it so that we would lean away from choosing this option. However, cacheable is true is not really an option that we need to make. Every block by default is cacheable. So I guess I haven't thought about, as I'm recording this video, if you have a cacheable false and then you come back later and override it with cacheable true, that could be a situation where it would be important to set that attribute. However, that would be a fairly, well, actually, then again, if you're cleaning up another custom modules code, that could be a potential option there. But all that to say, let's look through these answers critically and compare them to our Magento knowledge and see what we think as it would be a reasonable solution on this. So, number 1, or A, the toHTML method is not properly implemented. I'm going to pull up the slide to show this so we don't get visibility at this high level view. It's kind of hard to pack in that level of visibility into a question like this. But toHTML is not perhaps implemented correctly. Now, if you remember, this toHTML method literally outputs a string. So there is no caching that is built in by default to this part of the system. So I would say this answer just is not correct. The toHTML method has no control over caching, and I just don't see that being a viable option. So we already talked about B, but again, we're not talking about cacheable as false. That would prevent caching errors, but it creates a catastrophe of other errors. So cacheable is false, that wouldn't be a good answer, but cacheable true just doesn't seem like it's a good relevant option here. So it's an option, that potentially, but I don't think that's going to solve any problem because that is the default behavior of a given block. Now, the final answer here is the one I want to dive into a little bit, and that is identity interface. Identity interface is not implemented on the block class. Now, what this means is the identity interface is duplicated on a model as well as a block, and it's kind of weird to say it from that perspective. But the way this works is identity interface on a product gives the cache tags, and identity interface on the block takes the cache tags that were set, and it returns it back out when this block cache is saved. So we're specifically talking about the block cache. We are not talking about full page caching, although this can have an impact on that full page caching as well. It'll bubble up through that. But specifically, this question was more dealing at the block level. There are more opportunities for enhancement out of that. So the way this works is by implementing identity interface on the block, and this could mean interacting with a view model, which would be a little bit sticky in this type of a scenario. The identity interface specifies these cache tags, or these cache tags is probably the best way to put it, cache tags that are then returned out alongside this HTML. So basically we have like cache tag, and we have cache tags, and we have the HTML. And those are saved in the Redis database. Now, when it comes time to flush the cache for a product to save, okay, we can look up in this Redis database what are all the entries with the product ID of 5, and then we can flush all those entries out. So when it comes back time to loading that block cache in from Redis or your cache storage system, at that point, that cache entity has been destroyed. Now, again, this also does bubble up to the full page caching system as well. So identity interface is going to be a very important part of your overall system. And it's one of those things that's easy to overlook. I would say very easy to overlook, but it can have some, I'm not going to say catastrophic, but it can have some definite consequences. And I hope that you found this video helpful and inspiring to make you build even better Adobe Commerce applications.